Mercedes is tipped by many to be back on top in Formula 1 for the start of the new regulations era in 2026. Its illustrious history, the quality of its personnel, top-notch facilities, and its spectacular success last time the engine regulations were overhauled in 2014 all arguably support that suggestion. However, there are also doubts given Mercedes failed to conquer the ground effect regulations of 2022 to 2025. And it's only by avoiding the mistakes that blighted the past 4 years, when it was only the fourth most successful team in terms of results, yes, even worse than Ferrari, that it can live up to its prodigious potential. Not that Mercedes is talking itself up, far from it. Team principal Toto Wolff's mantra is "I'm never confident," so he can't be accused of complacency. What's more, it's impossible to know the relative competitiveness of the brand new power units, which are conceived to have a power split of roughly 50-50 between the conventional V6 internal combustion engine and the electric motor. Howell Thomas, head of the power unit project, says even he isn't sure how much power Mercedes will have come the season opening Australian Grand Prix. So how can anyone else be so sure? That said, the paddock rumour mill is often based on at least a kernel of truth, and it would be a big surprise if the Mercedes power unit is not there or thereabouts, especially as it is one of two manufacturers to have found a way to deliver a higher compression ratio than is intended by the rule makers, as we outlined in a previous video. But even if it's the market leader propulsion-wise, Mercedes still needs to prove it can beat its customer teams, Williams, Alpine and, crucially, McLaren. The only way Mercedes can do that is by proving the lessons of the past 4 years have been learned. As Wolff says, finishing second in the Constructors' Championship twice in this period is no disaster, but for a team of its lofty ambition, it's not good enough. To recapture the glory days, Mercedes not only requires a strong power unit, but also must produce a cutting-edge chassis. And while the car regulations themselves are also transformed, the 2026 car is the product of much the same tools, processes and people that never got it right in the ground effect era. If Mercedes can start 2026 as strongly as it did the last time new power units were introduced in 2014, or when the wider, higher downforce cars arrived in 2017, it could be on for another golden era. Starting a new regulations era well has always been important in Formula 1. If you start with broadly the right concept, you can plough serenely on with improving it, but if you're on the wrong track, you divert development resources to corrective action while others are only getting quicker. It's rare for a team to do what McLaren did in this era and turn things around after a bad start. The cost cap and the aerodynamic testing restrictions introduced in 2021 have made this an even bigger concern. A big team used to be able to use brute force spending to catch up, now that's impossible. That contributed to what Wolff admits was a team that never completely got on top of its car during the ground effect era. That brings us to the infamous Zero sidepods car that Mercedes launched with at the start of the ground effect rules. It was certainly innovative, with only Williams having a similar design. Williams soon ditched it, but Mercedes stuck with it. In simulation, the car produced eye-watering levels of downforce, and the rumour mill had it that Mercedes looked mighty. Unfortunately, when the car ran in the real world, it was badly hit by porpoising. That was the beginning of Mercedes not quite mastering the regulations, and trackside engineering director Andrew Shovlin accepts that these rules never suited Mercedes as a result. The die has long since been cast for Mercedes in terms of how well it will start 2026 on both the engine and chassis side. The question is whether those same simulation tools that sent it in the wrong direction 4 years ago with its initial car have now been sufficiently sharpened, and a huge amount of work has been done to improve them, or if there are nasty surprises lurking to catch the team out when it hits the track. If Mercedes starts 2026 behind and is playing catch-up, it cannot afford to be tricked into believing it has cracked it with one change. In the early days of the ground effect regulations, Mercedes was adamant it would unleash the underlying performance it was certain was in the car. That set the tone for the search for breakthroughs that led to what Wolff described as false dawns. In 2022, a combination of the new front wing introduced at the 5th race of the season in Miami and a new, stiffer floor for the following race in Spain appeared to have unlocked much of that promised car performance. While the Zero sidepods worked well in isolation, it meant significant exposed and unsupported floor area. This moved too much and required stiffening because of what might be called a cantilever effect. Effectively, there was more of the floor protruding beyond where it could be attached to the sidepod. The Spain upgrade tackled that weakness. In Spain, George Russell finished 3rd and Lewis Hamilton charged from near the back to 5th after a first lap clash with Kevin Magnussen's Haas. James Vowles, then Mercedes strategy director, described it as a car that could fight for the championship. However, new troubles were now exposed. The Mercedes W13 was conceived to operate at a low ride height, but was now running higher and without the range of rear suspension travel required to optimise that. Running stiff as a consequence meant that while porpoising was no longer a big problem, the related phenomenon of bouncing was. The car also struggled in slow corners. Russell won in Brazil late in the season, which was in itself an illusory breakthrough, given it gave Mercedes confidence that an evolution of its troublesome 22 car would thrive in 23. It didn't, failing to win a race. There was another example of a false dawn during the 2024 season when Mercedes introduced a flexible front wing at the Monaco Grand Prix. It had long struggled with finding a setup that worked well across a wide range of corner speeds, which was one of the generic challenges of the regulation set. If you have a powerful front wing, you have more front-end grip for the slow corners. The downside is that the faster the car goes, the closer the front wing gets to the floor, and the stronger its own ground effect, giving more grip than can be matched by the rear, creating oversteer. A more aero-elastic front wing reduced its effectiveness at high speed and unlocked more performance. This led to the strongest Mercedes spell of these regulations, winning 3 out of 4 races in the summer of 2024, and only being denied a 1-2 at Spa after Russell was disqualified for being underweight. Combined with changes made to the architecture of the Mercedes W15 for the start of 2024, including moving the cockpit position backward, having ditched the zero side pods, it seemed Mercedes was back. However, it was only a brief resurgence. Rear tyre temperature management and a narrow setup window for a car that worked best in fast corners but struggled in slow turns then proved to be a major weakness. That latter characteristic forced the drivers to use the throttle to help rotate the car, working the rear Pirellis harder. Hopes that would be fixed with the 25 car proved wide of the mark, and again the Mercedes, while quick, was only able to win twice. For any team to thrive throughout what should be a 5-year regulation cycle from 2026 to 2030, it's essential not to head down any blind alleys in development. Errors in development direction interrupted the recovery progress of Mercedes in the ground effect era. The Mercedes W14 of 2023, the only Mercedes that failed to win a race under these rules, is an example of that. An evolution of the troublesome 2022 car, the error made with it was to conceive it to run at higher ride heights, rather than low ones where it was easier to generate big downforce levels. For 2023, the FIA introduced rule changes designed to reduce the chances of porpoising that included raising the floor edge heights by 15mm. The big decision for Mercedes was whether to continue to conceive the car to run low, or try to maintain the progress made late in 2022 and chase downforce at a slightly higher ride height. Mercedes opted for the latter. And while the zero side pods were ditched with an upgrade at the Monaco Grand Prix in May, technical director James Allison later explained that the key conceptual change made then was to start to chase downforce at a lower ride height. The trouble is, by then significant ground had been lost and 23 was effectively a write-off. Even in the final year of the ground effect regulations, Mercedes still had the capacity to trip itself up. Having made significant gains with anti-lift in the rear suspension with the Mercedes W16 when it was launched in 2025, which is crucial for the mechanical platform control needed to optimise the aerodynamics, Mercedes attempted to take another step with the introduction of modified rear suspension geometry at Imola in mid-May. This was a consequence of the suspension being less stiff as a result of the installation. That in itself wasn't unexpected, but it had a bigger impact on the car dynamically than anticipated. It made the car more unstable and slower, making life particularly difficult for Kimi Antonelli, but also hindering George Russell. Inevitably, it took Mercedes a little time to understand its upgrade was actually a downgrade. The rear suspension was on the car for the Imola weekend, then off again for the events that followed in Monaco and Spain. It then returned for Canada, where Russell won from pole as the straight line braking and short radius corners didn't expose the weaknesses. The suspension continued on the car in Austria, Britain and Belgium before being removed for Hungary. As it turned out, for good. Mercedes wasn't the only team to make such errors during this regulations era. In fact, all the teams had their troubles, but it contributed to keeping it on the back foot throughout. When the 2026 cars break cover in January, there will be a good variety in design concept and ideas. History tells us that the cars will converge visually as the best ideas are adopted by everyone. However, particularly early in the 2022-25 regulation cycle, Mercedes held firm in sticking with a concept it believed had the best potential. As Chauvelin said in late 2022, you don't win world championships simply by copying everyone else's design. While that is the correct philosophy, and he stands by it, Chauvelin admitted in late 2025 that Mercedes could have been willing to be a little more adaptable in certain key areas. However, Mercedes did improve on this score. For example, in 2024, it switched from pull rod rear suspension to the push rod configuration, which was de rigueur among its rivals because it opened up greater aerodynamic opportunity at the rear of the car. So has Mercedes learned its lessons? It's often said in F1 that bad times can lay the foundations for success because a team spends so much time analysing its methodologies, tools and processes when things aren't going well that it comes out stronger. And there's no question Mercedes has gained a vast amount of knowledge. Next year's cars are different. They are no longer Venturi tunnel ground effect cars, with the return of the step plane floor and the expectation that ride heights will be higher, perhaps around midway between where they were in 2025 and in the previous rules era of 2017 to 21. However, ground effect downforce from the underfloor will still be important, even though, as Russell says, everyone at Mercedes is relieved by the clean slate offered by the new rules. No knowledge is wasted in F1. After its years on top, Mercedes has been through a long, hard period of soul-searching and work. Past failure is no guarantee of future success, but if Mercedes really has learned its lessons and poured that knowledge and know-how into its 2026 car, then if that's paired with a leading power unit, it could be a very dangerous competitor.